thanks once again for joining. Once again, my name is Olu. Thanks, everyone. What we're going to be focusing on today is a free masterclass on data analytics. Data analytics is a very, very interesting and powerful field, and in 2024 is really doing pretty good. I'm very excited about it. I have a bunch of students I've done full training on for, and they've become very successful, landed a lot of six-figure jobs. And so it's something that I've sort of picked up to say, you know what, let me kind of share some of that knowledge to people who are interested, people who might be slightly knowledgeable about it, as well as people who might just be fully curious about, what the data analytics field is all about. And within this, we're going to be looking at 4 critical areas, right? So we're going to be looking at SQL, we're going to be looking at Python as well, and then we're going to be looking at cloud analytics as well also too. We're also going to be looking at data visualization, and with that, we're going to be assessing, and we're going to have a good overview on Power BI service as well as Power Desktop. So with that in mind, let us go ahead and let me kick off over here. First thing I'm going to do is to share my screen, and hopefully you guys can see my screen as of now. And we're going to kick off really with, data analytics itself, right? We're going to quickly look at definition of data analytics, and we're going to look at some comparisons between data analytics and some relative fields such as data analysis and business intelligence. So without much being said, let us kick into this. So basically, some of the key tools and apps you can utilize with your data analytics are listed over here, right? So we've got tools like for visualization, you have your Microsoft Power BI. We also have other competitors like Tableau, which is very, very popular as well. So Microsoft Power BI is perhaps the biggest when it comes to this data visualization tools. So, very, very important tool to learn when it comes to data analytics. And then we also have the Microsoft Azure. And what really is Microsoft Azure? Microsoft Azure is a cloud platform that offers different sorts of cloud services that ranges from database services to analytics services, machine learning services, cloud security services, cloud deployment, software engineering, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to Microsoft Azure within the data analytics field, we have certain cloud analytics tools, such as our data factories for managing extract, transform, load. We also have a Power BI embedded solution within Microsoft Azure Cloud as well too. And then we have tools like Azure Databricks, which is basically a machine learning and notebook tool, as well as a SQL environment and editor tool as well too. So your Databricks does a lot of functionalities, such as managing your notebooks for data analytics, especially with like working with Python and Python kernels, especially with Python libraries such as NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. You can also write and execute SQL queries, manage data warehouses from it as well, and you can also perform a lot of machine learning and AI algorithm scripting within your Azure Databricks, so pretty big one. And then we have what we call the Azure Data Studio, which is definitely a database system, a database server management as well too. Very similar to, for those of us who are familiar with SQL Server Management Studio, Azure Data Studio brings in that experience of SQL Server Management Studio. However, it does a little bit more than that, right? It also connects you to your cloud database systems, and we're going to be taking a look at that shortly as we dive into these tool sets. And so with your Azure Data Studio, you can pretty much do everything you do natively with your SQL Server Management Studio, such as writing SQL scripts, accessing your database, writing queries to access the database, manipulating your database items, and you also would have access to your cloud database. You'll be able to query them and also work with your cloud database systems from the Azure Data Studio. And then we have tools like Jupyter Notebook and Anaconda that are basically used for managing and working with Python, especially when it comes to analytics. This is where you can work in environments such as Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lite, I believe. And then you can execute Python libraries. You can set up your environment, start to play with scripts such as NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. We also have Python itself as a tool and language, where we're not really going, when we talk about Python over here with data analytics, we're not really going into the coding part of Python. When it comes to data analytics, Python basically focuses on the statistical analysis of data. You understand? So analyzing data, manipulating data, transforming data, getting data from a database system, transforming it into different sorts of graphs. You understand? So that's pretty much what we use Python for mainly within the data analytics field. And so we have other tools like Crystal Reports and Excel, Microsoft Excel, that are used to sort of perform a little bit of visualization, but more so reporting of data. And then finally, like I mentioned earlier on, we have the Azure Data Factory, which in this case is a cloud solution system that helps us work with extract, transform, load processes, which is called ETL. So the ETL is called extract, transform, load. And basically, what does that do? It basically means you can extract data from any source. You can choose to transform that data, such as adding more data information to it, taking out some data, and then you can now eventually load that information into any other place or system. So for example, you might be in a company where they have Excel sheets that the business analysts are using on a daily to process certain customer transaction. You might have an ETL process that at the end of the day, say for around like 7 p.m., goes to pick up that file, takes the data from there, makes a call to another system to get certain data of those customers based on the information is seen within the current data it has picked up, add that data to the current data system it has picked up from the Excel, and then load it into a company's database to say, okay, these are the processed customers for today, and also have that new data, right, that is combined with it, loaded into that database. So that's kind of like a very simple example of an ETL process. So with that in mind, those are kind of one of the key tools that, we kind of use within the data analytics field. So let's jump into it, right? So what exactly is data analytics? Data analytics can be defined easily as the science of basically being able to analyze data, which is mostly raw data, right? To make high level or business level conclusions about that sort of data information. So basically it means you're taking data from different kind of data sources, be it taking it from a database systems, you're taking it from an Excel sheet, you're taking it from a data storage, which is like a cloud data storage, and you are making meaningful, conclusive data, meaningful, conclusive information about that particular data. That can come in the form of analysis, it can come in the form of visualization, and it can come in the form of basically manipulating that data. So that's kind of like a high level of what data analytics is in a nutshell. Let's take a look at some other examples over here. So we have different types of data analytics, right? We have what we call our descriptive analytics. We have what we call our diagnostic analytics, predictive analysis, and prescriptive analytics. One of the popular ones is your predictive analytics. So for some of us who are already in the data analytics field, you've been hearing about predictive analysis, right? And that basically focuses on using data to sort of predict what's going to happen in the near future. And that's very, very important. A lot of businesses want to kind of have an idea saying, based on the current data we have today, how can we determine what is going to happen in the future, analyzing this particular data. And so it becomes a very, very important part of data analytics. Descriptive analytics too is a very, very important one as well too. Let's jump back over there. And that describes your current data, right? Using your current data to sort of manipulate and see, hey, what has gone on, or what is really happening with this data within a specific period of time, right? So you take your data, you're like, okay, let's see, maybe you're Netflix, for example, and you're trying to understand your customers, and you're trying to understand performance of your streaming platform, right? You can use descriptive analytics to sort of perform various data analysis using different types of tools to understand where you add your highest sales, where you add your lowest sales, where you add more customers stay, where you add more customers decide not to resubscribe to your platform. So these are just a few different types of data analytics processes. So let's look forward here. We're just going to go through this a little bit. And then, because I'm looking at this from a PDF documentation I do use for like the full actual training. There are a few bunch of them, but we're not going to go through all of this as well too, right? We're just kind of quickly giving a high level, introduction and overview to data analytics before we jump into, some of the cool practical stuff. So let us look at some techniques over here, right? So when it comes to different data analytics techniques, we have things like regression analysis. Over here, basically, it entails us using a relationship between what we call different variables to determine how we can make a change effect from one data to another. We also have things like our time series analysis. Over here, basically talks about tracking your data over a course or period of time, right? And thereby, through that process, solidifying a very strong relationship between your data's point of occurrence and the data's value. You understand? So let's move forward a little bit and see some cool stuff here. We have what we call big data analytics. Big data, for some of us who have read about big data, it's kind of like a new buzzword right now in the tech industry, even though it's been around for a while. But big data is basically described as your not so normal typical data, right? So we're not even talking about database type of data. We're talking about the biggest types of data any company or any institution can ever want to leverage or use. So take, for example, Netflix. If you think about Netflix and you think about all the bunch of movies they have on their platform, you're thinking big data, right? Because just think about all the videos that they've uploaded within the Netflix platform all across the world. I don't even think I've seen a scenario where I've tried to measure down into the end of, how many, videos, or movies or documentaries are available on Netflix. Is a lot. And so big data typically measures in what we call terabytes or petabytes. You understand? And so that's like a very, very big data. If you're looking at it, they're telling you 1 petabyte is equal to about 1 million gigabytes. So you can just kind of think about, what we're talking about when we talk about big data. And so it's possible for us to sort of use big data to sort of store most of our data information, such as a company like Amazon or Netflix will do, right? Storing all the information, storing all their inventories and things like that. So it's a very, very big part of, data analytics. And then you also have what we call a big data analytics as well. So let's see, how does big data analytics work? Basically, it works by processing 5 different types of steps for its analysis of large data transactions and data sets. The first step is that it does the data collection, right? You take the data that you need to sort of process, right? So you collect that data. Then the next stage is that you store that data for future or current usage. And then the next step is processing that data, right? So when you have a data, such as collecting statistics of say for example, Netflix wants to collect statistics of new subscribers, right, within the last 2 months. So you have that data, you've collected it, you've stored that data in a specific place. Now you want to sort of process that data to sort of make meaning to it, such as, okay, let's see, within these 2 months, which one of these months did we have the most customers and which month did we have the least customers? And so during the processing, you can also do what you call cleaning, data cleansing. An example of this could be you just cleansing the data to say, okay, we've got all of this information from this data collection, but we do not need, let's say this particular data has 10 columns, but we want to focus on just 5 columns. So an example of data cleansing could be say, well, we don't need their social security, we don't need we might need their location, right? We might need their names, we might need some other things, but we don't, out of these 10 columns, we don't need 5 of them. So we are cleansing that out to sort of focus on the columns we need to analyze on. And then the 5th one, which is the data analysis, focuses on that part where we now analyze the data or the logic we need based off that remaining data. So in this example, the employees' information, or rather the subscribers' information you collected for the last 2 months to understand, the trait and behavior of customers subscribing and those who did not resubscribe. You can now analyze that data, be it in form of a report, be it in form of a visualization, such as a graph or a chart or pie chart, and then you can analyze that data that way. And that is what the 5th level is talking about over there. So with that in mind, we're going to pause over here, and I'm going to sort of jump into the key areas we sort of want to work into. One way I can go about doing it is I'm going to first take a look at, let's take a first take a look at Power BI, right? So I'm going to go over here, try to look for Power BI space over here to introduce us into Power BI. So I see SQL over there. We're going to jump into SQL next, but we're going to quickly take a look at Power BI. Let me do a quick find over here. All right. So let's talk about Power BI, right? When it comes to data analysis, there's a big part of data analysis that talks about visualizing data, right? So you take a meaningful data from a database, right? And then you sort of visualize it. And before we go ahead, let me quickly just show you an example of what we're talking about. Where you're talking about having a raw data and then visualizing that data. So let me move over here to my database system here. And over here, you can see this is the Azure Data Studio. And this is an example of what an Azure Data Studio environment looks like, where I have access to my on-premise server. Those are physical servers, and I have access to what? My cloud server. So as you can see over here, once I start querying this guy here, it's going to ask me to try to connect to my cloud service, and I'm going to do that over here. And then it's going to tell me it has connected to that, and I should be able to see at least one database system over there. And I can see my SQL Server right now, and I can see my cloud SQL Server and cloud database. If I look over here, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm using this Azure Data Studio, which is an application to access both on-premise servers and cloud servers. If I look over here at this server here that is called Goodwill University SQL Server, and I navigate to my web page, I can see within my cloud platform, which in this case is the Microsoft Azure Cloud Platform, I can see the specific database it's talking about. This is the specific database it's talking about. And if I exit over here and go back to my overview page, I can see the specific database. This is the database. You can see telling you SQL database, and this is the server that is tied to a database. Now, why is that structured that way? It's structured that way because typically, for you to have a database system where you can have tables within it, you need what we call a SQL server. And the SQL server is the server or the engine that sits behind that lets the database sort of exist in the very first place, right? So it's just like talking about a vehicle and talking about the engine. Without the engine in the vehicle cannot move, right? Cannot have any real proper use in terms of locomotion or movement. And so that is the close relationship between a server and a database. And so pretty much when we talk about Power BI, we're talking about receiving or getting data from something such as a database system, like we see over here. For example, if I look down here, or let me actually cancel that. Let me go to our servers. Give me a second over there. And for example, I might decide to take a look at this SalesDB database, or I'm just going to go ahead and look at some other databases over here. I'm going to drill down over here. And for example, I might say I want to look at the employees database. So I can go over here, right, run a quick automated query, and it shows me my database system over here that includes having different employees that have different sort of data for company. I can then now take this employee data, which is the source, and then I can use Power BI to sort of visualize data based on it. And what would that look like typically? Let us navigate over here to Power BI service. So over here, I'm going to go to what we call, this is a Power BI application. This is the cloud version. And I'm going to go into what I call my workspaces, and I'm going to select one of my workspaces over here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to drill to find some specific details I want. So I'm going to use my filter over here, and I'm going to go for, let me go for reports. So when I take a look at my reports, I want to focus on a specific report over here, or better yet, let me focus by semantic models. So within our semantic models over here, semantic models, first of all, what are semantic models? Semantic models are editing environments that give us access to things such as our data source, our data model, as well as a visualization report editor environment to make visualizations or to edit existing visualizations that are eventually transformed into paginated reports, reports itself, and visualizations itself. So let me take a look at one over here called the Contosco employees table. So over in here, you can see that within my semantic model here, I can decide to share this semantic model, or I can decide to access some of the information within my semantic model. One of the scenarios over here is I can see two different reports that have two different names. And then I can also see a customized dashboard associated with this semantic model. And so what have I done really over here? What I've done is I've gone to take a table source information, such as what we are seeing over here in our database, which is an employees table, and I have projected different visualizations and reports that give more meaning to that database information. So for example, let me go ahead and select this one over here. So over in here, I can see I have about 6 different sample visualization data. When I look over here, I can see that I have a pie chart, 2 different types of pie chart diagrams that kind of give meaning towards the different salaries that this particular set of employees earn. Over here, what it's doing is looking at information based on each employee's salary and is grouping each one of them. So over here, we see that we have 3 people over here based on this chart that are making 89,000 US dollars. And so when I select that itself, I can see that even my visualization is highly interactive. It is basically breaking it down to me and showing me those different people based on the current item I'm selecting. If I go over here where I see that there's a particular person who is earning a salary of 145,000, I can go ahead and select that as well. And then it shows me whoever that person is. That person is Brent Crawford, age 40, is an IT manager. The same thing as well, when I look at some of the data in here, this is telling me that this visualization is based off the sum of salary by first name and job title. From this diagram, the goal of this diagram over here through this Power BI is to let me know the different employees and the power of their salary. And then down here, it shows me their names as well as the position they hold. By me looking at this diagram over here, it is highly descriptive and gives me more clearer and cleaner information than this over here. Whereas in SQL, if I wanted to do this, I would have to do something such as writing a SQL query to know which manager has or which employee has the highest salary over here. With the aid of visualization, you have the advantage of managing data and viewing data with different people within the organization, such as your managers, the chief executive officers, the CIOs of the company, as well as other business partners and stakeholders, without having to write unnecessary SQL queries and having to have them add data. And so with that with the energy of Power BI, I can easily go and select this particular person over here, and it shows that particular person's data. And it tells me, even over here, it indicates it over here too. So by me working with this guy, I'm interacting with all of the other visualization based on the setup and configuration I made for this particular Power BI. If I wanted to click the edit button to see more information on how the configuration of all of this came to be, I can select that as well. When I select tables like this, I can see within my build visual the settings and configurations I've used over here. I'm using a concept here called salary, and I'm focusing on the values of the first name and last name. If I select this over here, you can see that this has the X and Y axis where I'm focusing on the first name and job title, and with a Y axis of sum of salary over here. This is thereby giving me a pure calculation here that shows me each particular person, such as Justin, and their job title, which is reflected over here. And so there is a lot that goes on within the background when it comes to Power BI and analyzing data. If I go back a step and we go back to our semantic model, let me do that over here. I can come back down here and look at my customized dashboard. The dashboard is simply what a dashboard is you having a simple screen where you can configure your top level visualizations. And so let me go ahead and click that. When I click here, you're going to see different visualizations that I've created within this particular Power BI application and that I've added to my dashboard. As you can see a breakdown, there are different things over here going on over here. You can see over here, this is doing a calculation of the count of the first name of employees by their job titles. As I continue to scroll down over here, you can start to see different types of visualization, each having their own unique configuration settings to come about bringing out this particular information. And so where's all of this coming from? It's basically coming off of a simple database information such as this. And so Power BI gives me the ability to do what? To use visualization techniques such as using what we call data models, using what we call our visualizations, filters, and data pane to sort of manipulate and bring out different visualization data. So as you can see down here, as we continue to go on, you see different sort of visualizations that I've come to create for this. And this was the one we were looking at not too long ago. By me looking at this, if I want to look at who has the lowest, it's probably somewhere between these two people over here based off the chart. And I select that person over there, you can see the data changes and it shows me that particular person and how much they are making. If I go ahead and select this, I reset my visualization. Different types of visualizations you can see over here. Over here, we're looking at people with the first name and the count of their last name by the year. So if I take this over here and I look at this particular person, well, what it's trying to focus on is telling you how the employees, how much employees or how many employees were employed, right, over the course of the year of this company. In 2010, the very first person that is over here, when we look at his data, Michael Billiard, is in the business department. When we take a look over here, we'll take a look at, say, for example, between 2014 and 2016, which is 2015, we see that 3 employees were employed, as we can see through that information. It tells us employed year, 2015. And we have 3 people over there. When I come over here, it reports that data. Their data also is spread across all of this place. When I go and I want to see how many employees were employed the most, I can see 2016 is top in that chart. I can see 2018 is top in that chart, 2019, as well as 2021. If I want to reset that, I simply click that and my statistics is reset. If I take a look at the age over here as well too, and I want to understand this data over here, I want to know which departments, as I see in here, I want to know different types of ages and see their impact across different departments. If I look over here, I can see that this company has people, because this is our age here, this is the age of the different people within the company. I can go ahead and select this over here, and I can see from that information that we have people, the most people in this company are 35 years. And I can see all those people. There are about 4 of them over there. So I can use this analysis to sort of look at different sort of data. And as you can see, there are different types of analysis. I can see the count of job title by the department. So the technology has this amount job titles, this amount of job titles. The business department has 4 job titles. We have the sales as well too, and other departments. We even have what we call our decomposition tree, which we're going to take a look at in a second. This particular chart here, which is one of my favorite, breaks down the full-time and contractor employees. With this, I can see all the different job titles, and I can see the amount of full-time employees we have in comparison with the contractor employees. And when I go through all of them, it gives me their details. When I select any one of them, I can use my board over here, which is a custom built table board, to see which particular contractor is over there. I can go ahead and reset that as well. So there are different types of data that we can use to understand different things. Here we have a scatter chart over here. And over here is telling me across the years that the company has employed the different employees he has. This has been their age space. In 2015, we have about 3 people. One was employed who was 30 years old, one was employed who was before 35, and another one who is what? 35. The same thing goes for you. This person is probably 32. So let's see. You see that? And when I click that, look at how interactive the visualization is. When I click that particular one person, let's do that again. This other charts give me the information, other analysis information that visualize that employee. He's under the technology department. His salary for him over here, you can see where it stands when it comes to comparing in terms of salary. You can see that it's earning somewhere in between 150K and 200K. If you take a look at that, you can see it's 175,000. And so the power for visualization becomes so very, very powerful. Let's go ahead and reset that. And then one of my favorites over here is what we call the decomposition tree, which sort of puts together your different employees based on whatever you want to configure, and then gives you a decomposition tree information about each one of them. I've started by looking at the different departments for the employees. So it first tells me there are 20 count of employees, and it shows me all of the departments. I'm looking now by way of technology. I'm concerned with the technology department. And over here, as you can see, each composition tree or decomposed tree over here is having the specific data of its function. So within the technology department, I'm seeing these different job titles. Under the software engineer title, there are 2 people engaged there. Within those 2 people, I'm deciding to focus on this particular person called Adekoya Williams. And then from there, I can decide to look at his age and his job title. If I wanted to focus on Barry, I would select Barry over here. When I select him, his last name shows up. When I select his last name, his age and what salary pulls up. I can decide to lay my focus on the IT manager. And I can select this particular person. It pulls out the last name. When I select the next, it pulls out the age. So very, very interesting statistics you can make with your what? Your Power BI. And I'm just going to go back and reset this way. And so there are a lot of things you can basically do with Power BI. Now, let us head back again to my workspace. Now, within the workspace itself, I can focus on other things over here, but we're going to go back to our semantic model. Within the semantic model itself, we're taking a look at this information over here. We're going to go back to one of our reports, and I'm going to select that. Now, whenever I click on the edit button, it gives me my report editor view. And this is a very, very powerful tool where I can sort of start making a lot of effective changes. Bear in mind, we also have what we call our Power BI desktop, which is only available on a Windows computer. And you can use that to also perform similar operations. So over here, I can decide I want to work on either one of the samples I was showing you. I can decide to operate on the data model. And the data model is a very powerful tool where I can sort of run in different algorithms, running how I want to change the structure of my data. So there's a lot of things that can go on with your Power BI. So for now, let us pause on that. I think that's enough for the Power BI side. So let's take a look at SQL. So basically, when we're talking about SQL, right, we're talking about a structured query language. And SQL itself has different companies that have their own different ways of writing SQL queries. We have Microsoft that calls theirs T-SQL, Transact SQL. We have Oracle that just calls theirs SQL. We have other companies that call theirs different things. We have PostgreSQL, we have MySQL. But one thing is common among all of these companies. It is the logic behind SQL. So whatever they do, even though the scripting languages will look a little bit different, the one thing they have in common is that there are certain principles on how a structured query language should look like. So you see, majority of them, their select all from this is always going to be standard. But when it now comes to different other deeper functions within SQL, you start seeing that different companies have their own structuring of how they want their SQL to look like. So with SQL, we're going to be looking at some very simple scenarios, and we're going to be talking a little bit about database schemas. Now, what is a database schema? A database schema in SQL is a list of logical structures of data, which means that a database user can own a particular schema within a database system. And that schema itself will have the same name or can have the same name as what? The database manager or owner of that particular schema. And so one relative thing that is very important is that I believe after 2005 with Microsoft SQL Server, they made some sort of certain changes where a schema becomes not just that description I gave to it, but also an individual entity, such as a container or object, that can also be distinct from the user who actually constructs the object. So let's take a little look at it. Now, over here, I'm going to show you a little bit of SQL, some few SQL queries. These are SQL queries I use for my full SQL training, for the students who are, currently trained. And so you can see over here, through the course of learning SQL, we go through a lot of SQL queries. What you are seeing over here, for example, is a question that is being asked. Create a new table called recruiters, soccer players with the following column IDs. During the creation of the tables, ensure these particular resolutions are met. And you can see here, I believe these are 10 different resolutions. Typically, I've even had students who are like slightly experts who have kind of come in. And when I give them simple tasks like this, of course, they might be 60% successful, but because I know I'm trying to put together all of the most complex scenarios, nobody's able to actually create that. But then through the training, I kind of guide them to let them understand and see how to successfully create such a table. And so in this scenario, you see a question being asked here, and basically this is what the answer will look like when you do it. And what are you looking at exactly? You're looking at a create table statement that basically creates a very high complex table. So there are a lot of things and examples like that. Now, let us take a look at another example over here. I'm going to open up another file that I typically use with students on a daily. I'm going to come down to, I believe, let's see over here. Okay, so I do not have that file over here, but what I do is I do have it on a different Mac. So I'm going to transfer that information. Give me a second. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and open that file there. And I'm going to head over to the downloads and pick that up. So over here, basically what you're seeing, and ignore these lines just because within this particular Mac system I'm using, it doesn't have the particular database called or database schema called employees DB. Over here, it has a different type of database called sales DB. But over here, you can see different create statements. So this over here is giving the description for a table creation. So when that table gets created, it is being created into what we call a database schema. And how do I know this is the schema? Because of this special word over here. This is actually the name of the table. And so what you're seeing over here in this create table statement is a combination of a table name, the schema it belongs to, and the database. The same goes for this over here. What you're looking at over here that has this funny icon is a database system. Within this database system, it has one table. When I extend that a little bit, I can see that table has this schema called salesDB owner.sales. The sales is the actual name of the table. The salesDB owner is what? The actual name of the schema. And it is under the database. Thereby, the mapping of that becomes salesDB dot salesDB owner.sales to query that particular table. Now, if I go ahead and try to attempt to query this table, I can't remember if I have data in it. Let's see. Okay, there's some data in there. So when I query that table, you can now see the mapping of that table. It starts with the database name, which is salesDB, as you can see over there, followed by the schema name, in this case, salesDB owner. And so one of the benefits of schemas is that people can now set certain rights on that schema so that when you access the schema, there are certain things you can do. Say, for example, if you want to perform roles like deleting something or creating something new, someone can set rules that prevent you from doing that on their own schema. It also means they have their own space within the database. So this particular owner of this schema called sysdb owner can have multiple tables spread in here. Another person could be from the marketing and say marketing DB owner and own their own schema. So as you can see, it's a logical structure within a database to separate ownership and manage, basically separating ownership, management, and structure for an organization, as well as controlling assets for that particular organization. And so that's pretty much the structure of that. So now let's take a look at something else. So say, for example, if I wanted to create a new schema. So I could go over here and just show you some quick examples. So over here, I see a query here. Over here, I can decide I want to create a new database, such as this. So for example, this was the query that created this SalesDB database. I can decide I want to create a schema within that database. How do I know I'm working with that database? It's because if I so choose to, I can go over here right now and do this. Employees DB. Now, before I run that, I'm going to double check on something to make sure this is the same so that I can, right in front of you, insert all of this data and create all of this for you to see. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to simply run this stuff. And I'm going to hit the run. It tells me the command was what? Completed successfully. So when I come back over here and I refresh this, or rather over here, what do I see? I see what? The employees DB database. It is that simple. Now, you can always make your database more complex in terms of writing more little stuff in here, but this is as simple as it is to create what? A database. I can now come into this database and see if it has any tables. Oh, boom, it doesn't have any table. Well, of course, it is brand new. So the next thing I can do is to do what? Create a schema for it so that I can own a space in here. And I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you don't create a schema. Typically, when you don't create a schema in a new database, your database objects, such as your tables, default into a general schema called DBO dot whatever object you want to use, aka DBO dot object. And so that becomes the default schema, which is not a custom schema and is the most basic one. So now that I have this employees table and I want to create a schema, one of the first things I have to do is to do it right. Whenever you're working with different databases and you start to run SQL script, you must always have a generic focus on the specific database you are working with. And so what that means is when I look at this, I have to click this over here to focus on the specific database I am now about to execute SQL scripts on. So I'm going to go ahead and select the employees DB so that now I can start executing SQL scripts within this specific database. And so I'm going to proceed and do that right now. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here and do some stuff over here and just undo that. Now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to call this emp DB owner. I want to measure and make sure that whenever I'm running these queries, I don't have to change much. So far, I've called the database. I've named a new database called employees DB. Now I'm about to name the schema, emp DB owner. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go here and I'm going to change this simply to emp DB owner. I'm facing my database, so I'm good to go. I'm going to run and execute that. And now that that has run, I'm going to refresh my database to check and see what's popping. Let me drop that down. If I want to perform a direct check, I can go under my security. And when I scroll down, I should see schemas. And when I scroll down, I can see all the available schema. And I can see my new schema over there, emp DB owner, that I just created. And so let me just undo that. So now I've created a database called emp DB, employees DB, and I've created a schema in it. So now I'm good to go and I can start adding tables into my database. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this file since it's a generic file I use. So I'm not trying to change anything. I use that for actual trainings. So I'm going to come into this place. Now look at all these weird lines. All of that is going to change soon. Over here, I'm going to switch over here. All right, I should say some of it will change. So as you can see, some of these other things are going out and getting out of there. Now I'm going to run some of this SQL scripts over here. But before I do that, I'm going to double check on something. I'm going to go into another documentation I have to look at the hierarchy of that specific data in there. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. And over here is also some sort of documentations I use. As you can see, some of the tables we use. I have what we call an entity relationship mapping over here that I use as an example for a full data analytics training. But I'm trying to go over here to some of the actual SQL scripts and see where this starts from. So this starts from a department and then a jobs. So for example, I'm going to try and run this. I'm going to copy this script over here. And then I'm going to navigate back to my data set. Over here, I'm not going to worry about some of all this information. I'm going to go above here and give myself some space. Right over here, I'm going to paste that data. And I'm going to create a departments table under this database. Two things are going on over here, basically. I have my create statement and I have my what? Insert into statement. Two different functionalities. The create is creating the table and structuring the columns that are going to exist within that table. The insert is inserting data into the table once the table has been what? Created. And by the way, guys, if you do have questions, definitely feel free to ask. You can also raise your hand, or you can also ask your questions within the chat. And so the very first thing I'm going to do is to show you an example of what happens if I create this table by just using this table name without a database or schema mapping. Compared to what we have over here, if you look at this create table statement, it has the table name is interested in, it has a schema, and then it has a what? A database that is focusing on. Remember when I said earlier on, whenever you do not describe, it defaults into a default schema called DBO. So to have more clarity, again, I'm going to refresh this table. And if I'm going to do a drop down, you can see we see nothing in there. Now, let me quickly go ahead and do this and run this statement. I've executed it, it's executed successfully. Now I'm going to simply refresh my table, and you can see exactly what I told you is going to do. It titles that DBO.departments. Now, if I was interested in creating this table within the schema that I've created for myself, because I want to have more leverage of control over my schema and the properties within it, I'm now going to go ahead and now copy this information over here. Because again, I'm targeting the employees DB database, which is listed here, and I'm targeting the what? The schema. So I can now come over here. I can now put that information there. And so the mapping of this now has two things before the departments, the table, the database, and the schema. And I can go ahead to run it. Now, but before I run it, what's really going on in here? It's going to create a table called departments, and it's going to put in two columns in there, the department ID column and the department name column. And so let me go ahead and run that. It has run successfully. I'm going to refresh this. Now you can see the difference. The one that had the custom schema now has the word this.departments. And so the same applies if I'm doing the insert. If I need to insert into the departments table, then of course, if I just run this, it is going to go into the DBO.departments because this department does not have a specific schema of target. If I go over here and I copy the schema and I put it that way, that is going to go into this place. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest that way. I'm going to go in there, paste that, paste that, paste that, this, let me close that. And so right now I have that information in there, and I can just go ahead to run it. And it tells me each individual rows had an effect. And so when I refresh that table, I can then go ahead and query this table to see the data within it. And as simple as that. And lastly, for the SQL part, we're going to look at primary and foreign key relationships. Now, technically, what was going on when I first created this is that it had what we call a primary key in here. And within this primary key, it was titled and assigned to the column called the department ID. Let's take a look at that closely. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to navigate to where we can see the query. Right? So over here, we have these two tables. I'm going to take this out, and I'm going to take this out. We have a simple select statement here that queries the table to show us all the data within the table. We can see he has two columns. When we were constructing our create table statement, we had these two items in there, and that is for the different columns, and we defined them. Now, the primary key here means that of these two columns, the department ID is what? The primary key. And so what now happens is that there's another thing that is called a foreign key. It means that if there's another table, for example, called the jobs table, and I wanted to tie a specific job to a department, I can reference this department ID column in my jobs table. So that way, from my jobs table, I can make a query to my departments table to find out any further details about that department ID. So let's go and take a look and see what that would look like. I'm going to go back over here to my script, and I'm going to look at the jobs. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to see if it has more data there. That is where the data ends. So I'm going to copy that information. We're going to come down over here, and the very first thing I'm going to do is navigate back to this particular place here. I am going to paste this information over here. Now, why am I pasting it over here? I'm going to take it away from here eventually, but I want to immediately copy and strategize on renaming all of these things here. So I'm going to navigate back over here. I'm going to go down to this particular script here. I'm going to copy this navigation item here. I'm going to navigate back to our previous one. And for the jobs, I'm going to paste that in there so that our jobs, when we run this create table statement, it is going to do what? It is going to put that information within our schema called the MDB owner. So as you can see for the jobs as well, what is going on over here? The jobs also has its own primary key called the job ID. But then what do we now see here? The job also has the department ID, which really is for the departments table down here, right? That we queried. Let's bring that up a little bit. And so what is going on over there is that it is telling it that, yes, this department ID in actual sense is really this guy here. But because he's in my home, he is no longer a primary key. In my home, it is what? A foreign key. And this does not have to be named as this guy. You can decide to name this even what? Department ID. So it's more or less like a reference. And how is it referencing it? It is referencing it by primary foreign key relationship. And it's doing that by using this command here. So it says you here are thereby defined as a foreign key, which automatically is being derived, which in this case is called references, from a table called departments, based on a column called department ID in that department's table. And so I'm calling out a column, and I'm giving it the privilege of it being a foreign key and telling it you're a foreign key, but you must also be a primary key somewhere. And in this case, your primary key is what? The department's table and the department ID, which is from the department's table. And so that is how the primary and foreign key relationship occurs. And so by me doing that, when I run this statement, I can now successfully connect those two tables together. Because of time, we're not going to go into that, but I just want to just show you the description. So now let's take a look at Python. With Python, we can use it for different sorts of purposes. In the programming sense, you basically use Python for running statistical analysis. So we're going to take a look at that very shortly. That I'm going to go up a little bit over here. And we're going to look at some basic things, such as built-in data types for Python. With Python, you have different types of data that you can play with. They are defined as a data type, which means if I sit down and I write a text such as hello world, I'm describing a text or a string. If I pick up a pen and I wrote 11,000 in numeric values, that is an integer. And so with Python, you have these different Python basics that are used to define Python. So in this case, we have some other types here that are described as bool, which is either you describing a true or false situation. We also have a situation where we map things into a list, and that's where we talk about sets. So we have things like our list, tuple, and range, which we shall take a look at shortly. So for me to do some of these things, the way I'm going to go about doing it is we're going to open up a what I call a Visual Studio environment, Visual Studio Code environment. And in this Visual Studio Code, I'm going to click File here, and I'm going to create a new file. In this new file, I'm going to go ahead and quickly cancel this at first, and I'm going to start that again. Okay, so I'm going to call this Python random tests .py, py being the extension for the Python file itself. It's going to ask me where to save that. I'm going to say yes, save that there. So over here now, we have a new file where we can run some basic Python. And so when we go through some basic Python descriptions, we are now going to do what? Navigate to what we call Anaconda and Jupyter notebooks, where we're going to see what we call Python libraries. As you can see over here, I'm using an extension of Python over here called Python libraries to do what? To perform more data analysis and manipulation using Python libraries such as NumPy, Pandas, and as you go down a little bit, you'll see where we are using other examples such as Matplotlib and Seaborn. As we move down, you can see the different diagrams. So let us start off from the basics. So back in here, I'm going to look at some key or basic examples, right? So one of them is, for example, if I want to group a set of fruits, right? And I want to take these fruits and I want to be able to print them out easily. One simple way I can go about doing that is that I can say, well, let me write a command here called thisset. And within this, I'm going to describe this and I'm going to put it into something I call a data set. And I'm going to put in things like apple. I'm going to put in things like, let's say, mango. I'm going to put in another item such as pineapple. And then I can put in a last one called orange. And so within this itself, I now have a specific list of items that are defined under this set. I can now go ahead to call this fruits if I want to. I can now go ahead and say, write a command that says for X in fruits, And then I can say, put in a command specifically here, and then I can attempt to do what? To print that out. I can say print X. And so for me to run that, I'm going to go ahead. And so what have I done over here? I basically took this command over here, fruits, which is a variable, and I put in some list of items into it. So imagine this was a list of employees, and you add each employee's first name or their social security. And then you now say, print out each one of these things, because that is what the for loop here is doing. The for loop is saying for each, which X is representing, that is each item inside this variable, prints them out. And within the print command there, it is doing what? It is passing in the X object. So I'm going to go ahead, click on this menu option over here, and I'm going to say start debugging. I'm going to run that. And I'm going to click trust there. And then I'm going to wait for it over here. Try to pull out the terminal. Give me a second over here. I'm going to bring that up. And so what do I see over here? I see the list of items that I've instructed this particular program to run. And that prints out basically all of the things that I told it to print out. And so this is a typical example of how you can use different sort of data sets within your Python. We're going to look at a more sort of complex example over here. So let's say, for example, I was dealing with a collection of cars. I can come in here and I can start up a new query. So let's say I was told to provide about 5 different items, right? 5 different cars that my dealership car sells. I can go over here and title this a new variable called dealership. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this one over here. So now we're dealing with a new different type of variable. I can go over here and I can say the new variable here is going to be called dealership autos. I'm trying to see if I got that spelling correctly, but I'm going to fix that. And I can put the sets of items I want. So in this case, the items I need in here, let's say I have 5 different car inventories. I have a Honda. Then let's say I have a Toyota in my dealership lot. And then let's say I have BMW as well. And then let's say I have a Nissan. And then let's say finally we have Lexus. So we are in the business of selling economic and some little bit of luxury vehicles. So basically, now that I have all of this, if I decide to go ahead and print out that information called dealership autos, I can do that by simply just typing a print command and say dealership autos. And then I can go ahead and run that. And I can see the items listed over here. Now, I can now decide to say, or we can decide to use that same printing method I used earlier on, right? So in here, I can go ahead and just easily just recopy that. Give me a second over here. So I don't have to retype that again. Okay. So I can go ahead and copy that same syntax here, replace it with this, and then put that in there. And change this to cars, because that can be anything. Then I can decide to take this out. And so now I can run that. And it prints out that information for me. And so the next thing now, supposing they told me, oh, you know what? We want you to add some new car collections to your dealer auto ships. I can then go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I can call the same variable called dealership cars, dealership autos, and then I can use the add command. And then I can add the set of cars. So let's say they told us, oh, you know what? You just have a new set of types of vehicles we are adding into this particular car collection. It's called Ford. So I can go ahead and add Ford in there. And then let's say, for example, they now told us again, well, 2 days later, they were like, oh, you know what? Go add another dealership vehicle that we just brought in. And let's say in the case of this one, in this case, let's say it is a, let me think of a different kind of car here. Let's say an Hyundai, right? A Hyundai. So I can go over there and put that in. And so by the time I use the add command in here, it's going to have all of this data, and then it's going to do what? Add this information, this new car vehicle, add this information, and then totally, when it prints out everything, it's going to print out not just this 5, but 7 vehicles. So let's go ahead and run that. So I can see over here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I can see the Ford and Hyundai included. I can see the Ford here, and I can see the Hyundai over here. So these are some simple examples of how you sort of use Python. So now let's take a quick look at Python with package libraries, such as NumPy, Pandas, as well as some other ones like Matplotlib and Seaborn. So when you're looking basically at this specific type of packages, right, or Python libraries, right, we're looking at something where we are not just doing our basic Python. We are now working with extensions of libraries to give us more power over how we can manipulate and analyze data. So I'm going to scroll all the way back up over here. So in this case, what am I doing over here? I'm using a specific command over here called, in this case, this command is called PIMS or PIMS SQL. It is a command that allows me to speak to my database system. So I can now use the PIMS SQL, which involves a little bit of configuration, setting up and installation, right? And then I can import that command here, and I can import other types of commands I would need, such as NumPy and Pandas. The NumPy and Pandas, they help us to further, like I said earlier on, further analyze and manipulate data in a much more powerful way than just the ordinary Python can do it. And so with the combination of these 3 different library technologies, I'm able to have an installation in place to connect to my database. In this case, what's my database? This guy over here. And then, as you can see, I can now connect to a specific database table and retrieve data from my database, bring it into my Python library kernel environment, and start manipulating that data and further analyzing it. I can even transform the data, cleanse the data, and make analysis sense out of that data. And that is exactly what is going on over here. Making a simple connection to a database, and then I'm running a SQL statement directly from my Python, calling that database system and calling a table there. Basically, the table I'm calling over here is right here in my employees. If I go down to the system databases and I go to the master, and I think we actually queried that database in the beginning, I can go under tables, and under the employees, I can see that data over there. So that is the table I'm querying over there. And then what am I doing? I'm using a technology called data frame to capture that data in order to read it and print it out. So you can see the output over there. So it shows the ID, full name, because those are the columns. It is what? Captured. And it's giving some conditions, some SQL conditions. Well, from the employees table, that is fine. But the conditions here is where the age is equal to or greater than 30, and where their first name does not start with A. So if I look here, I should not see two things. I should not see anyone that is below 30 years old. So you can see their ages. There's nobody below 30 years old. And I must not see anybody that has a first name that sounds like A, that or starts with A. So as you can see over here, there's no first name that starts with A. And so when I move into other categories over here, I can continue to see other types of commands I'm writing within my Python environment over here using these Python libraries. I can go down a little bit and let's take a look at a different example. Over here, it is giving us, I'm giving descriptions of exactly what is happening over here. I'm saying the goal is here is to manipulate data. What is expected is this, where you are replacing what we call a location ID column values with all employees' actual work location states. So over here, technically, within the data that is given here originally, the different numbers that are in there, right? So this particular table has a specific number, 1 and 2. It's getting that data from a data collection called DF1. And it's calling it this. Now, what it's now doing is the value for DF1 has 2 rows, 1 and 2. And where are those coming from? They're coming from over here. Let us go and grill the database. It's coming from the work location database table, which if I query, has location ID 1 and 2. And so I'm now using a replace functionality to replace the value of 1 and replace the value of 2. So when I come back in here, I can see that 1 is being instructed to be replaced as California and 2 is being asked to be replaced as Washington. So if I want, I can always add that information into a table and do that exactly. Over here, you can see from the collection that we derived over here, which is DF1, right? So this query we've had right now puts all of our information into DF1. And DF1 has been constructed into a data frame. So DF1 now holds what? This data you're seeing. So that's why over here, we are doing a quick search over here. So look into DF1 where the first name contains George and let me know across all tables what is going on. So it checks, oh, false, false, false. But when it comes here, it sees this as true and it picks it up. So you can see there, the part is saying true. You can see it over there, George. So that query is basically doing a check to see where things are true or false. So the same thing over here. This one is a little bit different. This one right here, based on how it is structured, goes ahead and you can see it's just changed a little bit, right? By adding a newer structure and passing in the DF1 again, it filters out the specific data we need as opposed to doing the false true situation to filter out the specific data that is looking for. So there are multiple ways to use NumPy and pandas to manipulate and print data. As you can see, all of these different things going on here. I can even, from my Python libraries, perform an insert into a database and say, hey, go and insert this new set of data into this database table. And that is possible as well. And so another key thing I can do over here too is we can use matplotlib and Seaborn as well to do what? To print out visualization data. So as you can see over here, we are using the plots to sort of transform data over here based on this particular data here. You can see this is called the data plot. It has the ID name of the employees, their first name, their last name, their age, gender, and job ID. When I come down here, I can now use different systematic operations and algorithms to use the plot to display different types of data I want. In this place, I'm using an axis X label to define the different years of data in here, as well as looking at things such as their age, ID number, job, and hire date. Something a little bit similar to what we're looking at when we're working with Power BI. To see different employees as well as far as where they fall in during the years. If I look down over here as well too, I can see a different example where I'm using a data plot to focus on the age and the IDs of the employee. And so we have multiple other examples such as this scatter plot as well too. You can see this is a scatter plot where the scatter plot, the x-axis is focusing on the age, the y-axis is focusing on the job ID. So it's telling us different people with different job IDs, they fall into what? These different age brackets. And so you can use similar to what we saw when we were working with Power BI, where we saw the different types of, let's come back over here to see the dashboard so that we can see the bigger values. Let's click that, come back to our semantic model, and I can click on my dashboard. And then if we scroll down a little bit, give it some time. There's an example over here as well too, but I like the other data plot more, scatter plot more. Over here, so same sort of concept over here. We are doing what? We are achieving that with the aid of what? Matplotlib. Over here, using the plot scatter to achieve that. And so that is one of the key purposes of being able to use Python libraries to manipulate, analyze data in different forms, capture the data from a database to transform it, and then analyze it, as well as visualize it with the aid of Matplotlib and Seaborn. And so we have other typical examples just like that. You can see this is more or less, this is a different types of, this is a different type of data plots. So that's kind of how to sort of use, Python libraries such as, NumPy, Panda, Matplotlib, and Seaborn. And you can manipulate data as much as you want. Now, two other things I wanted to kind of look at before we run out of time is, if I come back over here, looking at extract, transform, load, right? And what we call Databricks. So Databricks are things that are accessible through an Azure cloud environment, right? So over here, you can see a specific Databrick environment. I think it's been open for a while, so it's probably kind of hanged up somewhere. But I can click a new button over here, and as you can see, that is Microsoft Azure Databricks. And then if I want, I can go ahead to actually even just close this environment since it looks a little bit tired. And I can come back into my environment over here. This is a data factory environment. Let me go to the Databrick environment, and I'm going to launch my Databricks over here. And this is a environment that I provisioned and deployed within Azure Cloud. And so within my Databricks, I can basically perform lot of data innovative solutions in here or projects. So I can decide I want to start with doing what? Importing and transforming data, where I can create a pipeline. In fact, to make myself put myself on the same page here, I'm going to go ahead, close that, and I'm going to reopen it inside here so that we're operating from the same page. I'm going to bring that close over here. So what do I see inside here? I can see that even within what we call an Azure Data Factory, which you can use to sort of implement extract, transform, load processes, as well as work with your SSIS packages, I can also create pipelines here. And the same thing goes for the Databricks. In fact, the Databricks is so diversified of an environment that I have other capabilities, such as performing what we call, the kind of operations we're working in here when we created a kernel environment to initialize a Jupyter Notebook file to work with. I can do the same thing with Databricks, where I can create things like a notebook. If I initiate that, it's going to try and create an environment. And this environment is basically similar to an environment like this, where I can run similar scripts like this over in this environment. This is a current workspace that is open for me. If I want, I can go ahead and see how I can recreate this one over here. See this, I'm going to say start and attach that. And so once I have my cluster environment kicked off, you understand, it's going to create a kernel opening for me. What is a kernel opening? While that is being processed, I'm going to show you here. When we are running this is running based on a Python kernel environment. So you can see it over there. You can see the kernel over here. I can choose to restart the kernel or interrupt it. That is basically the same thing I just initiated over there that is starting. However, the difference between that is this is a on-premise environment that this is working on. You have to install all the things you need to have all of this working. So we call it on-premises. It's physical. In the cloud, you use Azure Databricks. Nothing you are doing here is involved with your physical system. It's all in the cloud. Even the computing system, because before you run this, what is going on that is doing is initiating a new compute system behind, which is a super machine to allow you to have the environment where you can start writing. As you can see, I've configured this one for what? For Python, such as this as well too, that is focused on Python. So that's how you sort of use this environment to work. And then you have other things like your data factory as well too. We just ran out of time, so we won't have time to cover that. But the data factory is very simple, where that's why I was talking about the ETL process, where you can take data, create, take a data from one particular source. The source could be from your local computer, it could be from an Excel sheet, and then you transform the data if you want to, and you move it to a different location, such as a database system. Yeah, if I take a look at this, what you are seeing here is a cloud database system. It is Civil SQL Server, which we looked at roughly about an hour or so ago. And then with this, I can sort of start manipulating and looking at my database systems. I can go into my database system over here, and I can decide to log into my database. And this, again, is different. Over here, we're looking at an on-premise database system. Over here, we are looking at a cloud database system. Go in there. And I can log in. And when I log in, what I can see is access to my database systems. I can query any one of these databases to see what is in there. And I can move that way and see all the data. And I can see my query environment, right? Just like I could see it over here as well too. And so that's how you basically walk around with items like that. So as we wrap up, does anyone have any questions that they had that they needed a response on? So guys, just wanted to let you know, if you are interested in experiencing a full IT training when it comes to data analytics, I'm having new classes that are kicking off on May 6th and May 13th. So I'm going to share my number over here for those that are still in the room. I'm going to share it through the chat. So if you're interested, you can send me a direct message or WhatsApp message. And you can also go to the website as well too. I'm going to share that information over here. Some of you already know the website already. Some of the people in the room already know them, so they are familiar with the website. So you can go to my website, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can navigate around it to find more details. So when you're on my website over here, which is carstacksolution.com, this is the home page. You can decide to scroll down a little bit. Feel free to, look around. For those who might be interested in a cloud solution, you can learn more about that over here. You can see certain other people have trained. This person just finished the training, I think around February or thereabouts. And, she was actually one of the fastest. Our training was a data analytics training. I think in less than 2 weeks or so after our training, she bagged a 6-figure job. She's doing that right now and joined. I think she just recommended 3 other new people that are in the current data analytics class that I currently am in. I think those classes occur. I had one earlier before this class started, and I have another different one, I think on Mondays as well too. So very, very interesting set of people. This was a person for cloud solution architect training, as well as Abiola right there. And a few more people over here. This is an Asian girl, and then this is a Yoruba friend as well too that went through some of the trainings. So as you go down over here, you can click on IT trainings. When you click on the IT trainings, you scroll down over here to your data analytics and SQL if you want to read more about the syllabus. So you can always download a copy of the syllabus where you look at items that we typically go through for this training. So you can go over here and look at the different things that are covered for that training. Typically, the cost for the training itself is about is $960, and the training itself starts on the 6th of May and as well as the 13th of May. So if you're interested, definitely be sure to reach out. If you're curious as to what data analytics and you can, once you're on the web page, I have a live Glassdoor salary confirmation page over here, and this is a real-time data. So when you click on it, it shows you real-time currently what data analysts are earning according to Glassdoor. And as you can see over there, I can go ahead and close this again and just click it over here. You get to see how much they are earning right now. So they're all mostly in 6-figure categories. That's what I've been seeing recently as well to most of the people that finished my training. When they tell me the salaries they are being paid as well too, it's all 6 figures. So it's pretty much doing very well, of course, as well as other different IT fields as well. But, data analysis is just something big that is just really blowing up. It's been blowing up since last year, and it's just pretty much blowing up much more in 2024. So you can see some top companies that are currently with, that pay data analytics, and you can see how much some of them are paying. So companies like Google pay up to over 200 grand, as well as, companies like Microsoft paying this much, and so on and so forth. All right. So let me see. I don't think I left anything out. So this is where we're going to stop to tonight. Thanks everyone again for joining. If you do have questions, don't forget I've shared my message within the chat. So definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions. All right. And then I think that's just all. So I'm going to see you guys soon again. All right. We host this free masterclasses from time to time. So if you are interested in more masterclasses, you're going to be seeing me sharing that out across different groups. And if you're interested, definitely let me know, and I would sort of include you in that, and you can also always register through those links as well. Okay, thanks everyone, and looking to see you in the near future again. Thank you.